Welcome to Dark Hunt, where shadows come alive and every story leads you into the unknown. Don't forget to subscribe. Let the hunt begin. The endless train. It was supposed to be an ordinary train ride. When Nora boarded the Midnight Express to Ridgeville, she thought little of the old-fashioned charm of the train. Polished wood paneling, brass fixtures, and velvet curtains gave the carriage a sense of timelessness. The ticket she'd found in her mailbox was a mystery, but it bore her name and the exact date and time she needed to leave.
A free ride.
She wasn't one to question luck. The platform was unusually quiet as she stepped aboard. The conductor tipped his hat, his pale eyes glinting beneath the brim.
"Welcome, Miss Nora,"
he said, in a voice that sent a shiver down her spine.
"Enjoy your journey."
She nodded, brushing off the strange sensation, and found a seat in a nearly empty carriage. The other passengers kept to themselves, faces obscured by shadows despite the dim overhead lights. The whistle blew, and the train lurched forward, the rhythmic clack of wheels on tracks quickly lulling her into a daze. As the countryside rolled past in the dark, Nora's thoughts wandered. She noticed her phone had no signal, but that didn't bother her much. This was a chance to escape, to leave her troubles behind. She leaned back and let the gentle swaying of the train relax her, until the whispers started. At first, Nora thought it was the hum of the train, a trick of the metal and vibrations. But the whispers grew louder, distinct, and impossible to ignore. She sat upright, scanning the carriage. The other passengers remained motionless, their heads bowed or turned away.
Did anyone else hear that?
She asked aloud. No one responded. A man in a trench coat adjusted his hat, hiding his face. A woman clutching a child's doll rocked slowly in her seat, humming a tuneless melody. The air seemed heavier, the dim lights flickering slightly. Feeling unsettled, Nora stood and moved toward the adjoining car. Sliding the door open, she stepped into another carriage, identical to the first. Rows of passengers sat in silence, their faces obscured. The whispers followed her, growing louder. They weren't words, exactly, but fragments, pleas and sighs that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. She turned to go back, but the door behind her was gone. Panic set in as Nora realized she couldn't retrace her steps. The door had vanished, replaced by an unbroken wall of polished wood. She ran toward the next carriage, hoping to find someone who could explain what was happening. As she stepped through, the whispers ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. This carriage was empty. No passengers, no luggage, not even dust. The seats were pristine, as if waiting for someone or something. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally as she walked down the aisle. The windows showed nothing but darkness, the landscape outside swallowed by an endless void. A chill crept up her spine as she noticed something strange. The seat numbers, embroidered in gold, counted backward as she moved forward. Confusion turned to dread as she reached the final seat, number 0. When she turned back, the carriage was no longer empty. A figure stood at the far end of the aisle. It wore a conductor's uniform, but its face was obscured by shadow. Even in the dim light, Nora couldn't make out any features. The figure raised a hand, beckoning her forward.
"You're not supposed to be here,"
it said, its voice deep and distorted.
What is this place?
Nora demanded, her voice shaking.
What's going on?
The figure tilted its head, as if amused.
"You boarded the train. You accepted the journey. There's no turning back now."
Turning back?
She whispered, stepping away.
I didn't agree to this.
The shadow conductor moved closer, its footsteps silent.
Every passenger comes willingly. You're no different.
Nora turned and ran, her heart pounding. She threw open the door to the next carriage and slammed it behind her. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The next carriage was the same as the first. Rows of silent passengers. This time, their faces were turned toward her. Their eyes were blank, their expressions frozen in a mix of fear and despair. Nora stumbled past them, avoiding their empty gazes. She reached the door at the far end and opened it, only to find herself in yet another identical car. The passengers were still there, but their positions had shifted slightly, as if they'd moved while she wasn't looking. Her pulse quickened. No matter how many doors she passed through, the scene repeated. The same carriage, the same passengers, the same oppressive whispers. The train was a loop, a trap with no exit.
This isn't real.
She muttered to herself.
It's a dream. It has to be.
But the pain in her legs and the cold sweat on her skin told her otherwise. This was real, and she was running out of time. In one carriage, a man reached out as she passed. His hand was skeletal, his voice raspy.
Stop running.
He said.
It only makes it worse.
Nora froze.
What do you mean?
He gestured to the seats around him.
We all ran. Now we're part of it.
Part of what?
She demanded.
The train, the endless journey, it feeds on us.
Before she could ask more, the man's form flickered and dissolved, leaving only an empty seat. The other passengers turned their blank faces toward her, and the whispers grew deafening. Determined to escape, Nora decided to break the cycle. She stopped running and sat in an empty seat, clutching the armrests as the whispers clawed at her mind. She closed her eyes and focused, refusing to let the train take her. When she opened her eyes, the train had stopped. Outside the window, she saw a dilapidated station bathed in pale moonlight. The air felt heavy with decay, but it was her only chance. She stepped off the train, her legs shaky. The platform was deserted, and the silence was suffocating. As she moved through the station, she found a sign covered in grime. Wiping it clean, she read,
Last stop, Eternity's Crossing.
The shadow conductor appeared behind her, its form towering and more defined.
You've reached the end of the line, Nora.
It said.
Will you board again, or will you face what lies beyond?
Nora turned to the dark expanse beyond the platform. A faint light glimmered in the distance, calling to her.
What's out there?
She asked. The conductor's shadowy form seemed to ripple.
Freedom or oblivion. The choice is yours.
Nora hesitated, then stepped off the platform toward the light. The whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence. For the first time, she felt truly awake. Behind her, the train's whistle blew, and it disappeared into the void, waiting for its next passenger. Nora's steps felt weightless as she moved toward the distant light. The landscape beyond the station was a surreal expanse, a field of glowing mist stretching endlessly. As she ventured further, she noticed faint silhouettes wandering the fog. They moved aimlessly, whispering fragments of sentences.
He'll never forgive me.
One murmured.
Where is she?
Asked another. Nora approached one of the figures, her voice trembling.
Who are you? What is this place?
The figure turned toward her, its face shadowed and featureless.
We are the ones who couldn't decide.
It whispered.
Lost between the train and the light. Neither here nor free.
The mist thickened, swirling around her. Nora felt a pull, something in the mist calling her back toward the train. It wasn't the light. It was cold, oppressive, and hungry.
What happens if I go back?
She asked.
You feed it.
The figure said, its voice fading.
And you never leave.
Nora turned toward the light. It flickered, a distant beacon of hope. Behind her, she heard the faint whistle of the train, its oppressive call growing louder. The conductor's shadow loomed in the mist, his voice cutting through the whispers.
Decide, Nora. The train won't wait forever.
Nora clenched her fists, fighting the pull of the train.
I choose the light.
She said aloud. The mist roared, the voices of countless passengers screaming in unison. The train's whistle sounded one last time, a piercing shriek that seemed to shake the ground beneath her. She ran toward the light, her steps quickening as the mist clawed at her. With a final leap, she broke through the fog. The light engulfed her, warm and blinding. The voices faded, replaced by a profound silence. When Nora opened her eyes, she was standing in a sunlit meadow. Birds sang, and a gentle breeze caressed her face. The endless train was gone, its whispers and shadows nothing but a distant memory. She looked up and saw others, figures stepping out of the light, their expressions relieved and hopeful. Among them was the skeletal man from the train, now whole and smiling faintly.
You made it.
He said.
What happens now?
Nora asked. He gestured to the horizon, where a path wound through the meadow.
We move forward. No more loops, no more whispers. Just freedom.
Nora took a deep breath and stepped onto the path. The weight of the endless train finally lifted.